The story of the USS Tang is one of the most profound paradoxes in naval history. It is a saga that encompasses the absolute zenith of American submarine warfare and its most devastating tragic irony. In the fall of 1944, the Tang was the undisputed predator of the Pacific. She had sunk 33 ships, totaling 116,454 tons, in just 9 months of combat. Her commander, Richard O'Kane, was arguably the most gifted tactician of the war. Yet, this machine of destruction was not defeated by Japanese depth charges, destroyers, or aircraft. She was killed by her own final shot. A malfunctioning torpedo that completed a fatal, geometric arc in just 20 seconds. To understand the tragedy, one must understand the machine. The USS Tang was built at the Mare Island Navy Yard in Vallejo, California, and commissioned in October 1943. She was a Balao-class fleet submarine, the pinnacle of World War II underwater engineering. An improvement over the earlier Gato class, the Balao utilized high-tensile steel for its pressure hull, allowing a test depth of 400 feet, though daring commanders often pushed her deeper. She was powered by 4 Fairbanks Morse diesel engines on the surface and 4 Elliott Company electric motors while submerged. Her battle flag depicted a Black Panther ripping through the Japanese rising sun, a symbol that would prove terrifyingly prophetic. But a ship is only as good as her captain. Richard Hetherington O'Kane was born in New Hampshire and graduated from the Naval Academy in 1934. His legend began before the Tang, aboard the famous USS Wahoo, under the command of Mush Morton. It was on the Wahoo that O'Kane learned a revolutionary style of warfare. Morton threw out the rulebook. He allowed O'Kane to man the periscope during attacks while Morton ran the calculations. This partnership taught O'Kane to be aggressive, to fire from point-blank range, and to trust his instincts. When the Wahoo was lost with all hands shortly after O'Kane left to command the Tang, O'Kane was driven by a cold, calculated fury to avenge his fallen shipmates. Tang's career was short, sharp, and violent. She departed Pearl Harbor in January 1944 and immediately began rewriting the record books. O'Kane's tactics were terrifying to the enemy. He didn't just fire from distance, he brought the Tang into the middle of convoys on the surface at night, slashing through formation lines like a wolf in a sheep pen. During her second patrol near Truk, Tang demonstrated that she was a savior as well as a destroyer. In a daring operation, she served as a lifeguard for a massive carrier airstrike. On April 30th and May 1st, 1944, Tang rescued 22 downed American aviators. The scene was chaotic and heroic. A Kingfisher floatplane that had landed to pick up survivors couldn't take off due to the weight, so it taxied across the ocean to the submarine. O'Kane crammed the wet, grateful pilots into every corner of the boat, cutting his own crew's rations in half to feed them during the 3,000-mile journey back to Pearl Harbor. Her third patrol in the Yellow Sea was the single most destructive patrol of the war. In shallow waters where the submarine's keel almost scraped the bottom, making diving impossible, Tang sank 10 merchant ships. She decimated convoys so effectively that Japanese shipping lines began to collapse. By October 1944, the war was reaching its climax. The Battle of Leyte Gulf was imminent, and Japan was desperately trying to move troops and supplies through the Formosa Strait to defend the Philippines. O'Kane was offered the chance to lead a wolfpack, a coordinated group of submarines. He refused. He preferred the speed and stealth of operating alone. He took the Tang into the Formosa Strait, a 100-mile-wide choke point with dangerous currents and heavy enemy patrols. The night of October 24th was a massacre. Tang intercepted a massive convoy of tankers and transports laden with planes and ammunition. O'Kane drove the Tang right into the center of the formation. In the confusion, Japanese destroyers began firing on their own ships. Tang moved like a phantom, firing torpedoes at 900 yards, point-blank range. Tankers exploded in massive fireballs, transports capsized. By the early hours of October 25th, the Tang had fired 22 of her 24 torpedoes. The sea was lit by the fires of burning ships. O'Kane spotted one last target, a damaged transport ship that was dead in the water but refused to sink. He decided to use his last 2 torpedoes to finish the job. He pulled the Tang back to 10,000 yards to perform a final maintenance check. The crew in the forward torpedo room withdrew the last 2 fish from their tubes to inspect the gyroscopes and batteries. These were Mark 18 electric torpedoes. Unlike the steam-powered Mark 14s that left a visible wake of bubbles, the electric Mark 18s were silent and invisible, making them deadly but complex. Satisfied, O'Kane moved back in. He closed the distance to 900 yards. It was 2:30 a.m. He gave the order. The 23rd torpedo was fired and ran hot, straight, and normal, striking the target. Then, the final order, fire 24. The last torpedo left tube number 4. On the bridge, Chief Boatswain's mate Bill Leibold was watching through binoculars. He saw the phosphorescent glow of the torpedo as it entered the water. Suddenly, the torpedo broached. It popped out of the water like a porpoise. When it slapped back down, the impact likely jarred the rudder mechanism hard over. Leibold screamed, "Captain, that's a circular run. It is the submarine commander's worst nightmare." The guidance system had failed, locking the rudder in a turn. The torpedo was now hunting the ship that fired it. O'Kane reacted instantly. "All ahead emergency. Right full rudder." He tried to fishtail the submarine, swinging the stern away from the incoming weapon. He needed distance and speed. But the Mark 18 traveled at 29 knots. The Tang, starting from a low speed, could barely reach 6 knots in those few seconds. The closing speed was over 30 knots. The math was impossible. Exactly 20 seconds after being fired, the torpedo completed its circle. It slammed into the Tang's stern, between the maneuvering room and the after torpedo room. The explosion was cataclysmic. It sheared off the propeller shafts and destroyed the engine controls. The stern dropped instantly, violently, like a pendulum. The 9 men on the bridge, including O'Kane and Leibold, were hurled into the dark waters of the Formosa Strait. But the horror was just beginning for those trapped inside. The submarine didn't sink completely at first. The bow pointed skyward at a 40-degree angle, bobbing above the surface, before slowly sliding backward into the depths. She settled on the bottom at 180 feet. Inside the forward torpedo room, about 30 survivors gathered. The situation was dantesque. A fire had broken out in the forward battery compartment. The heat was so intense it was melting the paint off the steel walls. The air was filling with thick, acrid smoke and carbon dioxide. The men had only one way out, the escape trunk. This was the only instance in the entire war where an American crew attempted a mass escape using Momsen lungs, primitive rebreathing devices. The process was slow and terrifying. The men had to enter a small chamber, flooded with water until the pressure equalized with the crushing depth outside, open the hatch, and float to the surface. Panic set in as the heat rose. Some men couldn't work the latch. Others made it out of the hatch but ascended too quickly, their lungs rupturing from the rapid change in pressure. Chief of the boat William Ballinger, a hero who organized the escape, drowned upon reaching the surface. In the end, out of the 30 men in that room, only 5 reached the surface and survived the night. The rest succumbed to smoke, fire, and asphyxiation in the iron tomb 180 feet down. By dawn, only 9 men were alive in the water, O'Kane and the bridge crew who had been thrown overboard, and the few who had escaped the sunken hull. They floated for 8 hours, clinging to debris. Eventually, a Japanese patrol boat, P-34, approached. But salvation was grim. The Japanese sailors on board were the burned, wounded survivors of the very convoy Tang had destroyed the night before. When they realized who these Americans were, they didn't offer comfort. They hauled the Tang survivors onto the hot steel deck and began to beat them. They were kicked, clubbed, and burned with cigarettes. O'Kane later wrote that realizing their abusers were the victims of his own success made the pain slightly easier to bear. It was the brutal logic of war. The 9 survivors were transported to Japan, to a secret interrogation center at Ofuna, known as the torture farm. They were kept in solitary confinement, starved, and denied medical treatment. They were classified not as prisoners of war, but as captured enemies, a distinction that allowed the Japanese to bypass the Geneva Convention. O'Kane was singled out for the worst treatment. When the war ended 10 months later and American forces liberated the camp, O'Kane, once a fit 170 pounds, weighed only 88 pounds. His survival was considered a medical miracle. Yet, all 9 men who were pulled from the water that morning survived the war. Richard O'Kane was awarded the Medal of Honor by President Harry Truman. His citation praised his conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in the attacks that preceded the sinking. The USS Tang remains the most successful American submarine of World War II by number of ships sunk, 33, and tonnage, 116,454. Her loss at the hands of her own weapon remains a singular, haunting event in naval history. It serves as a reminder that in the high-stakes technological warfare of the 20th century, the margin between legendary victory and total disaster can be measured in a jammed rudder, a 20-second circle, and the unforgiving physics of the deep.